Hey everybody, NFI Hammer here. I'm super excited to paint my third ever Warhammer Underworlds miniature warband, the Emberwatch. This comes in the Emberguard box set, which marks the second edition of the Warhammer Underworlds game. So I'm super excited to get painting these guys. I haven't painted anything like this. I do make some mistakes along the way, but overall I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Let's get started. So if you've seen my channel before, you know I'm primarily a Warhammer 40k player. I collect Necrons and I've been in the hobby now for about 2 years, but I have a few friends that I'm hoping to be able to convince to play tabletop gaming with me, and I had bought the Warhammer Underworlds Wintermoor set as a way of hopefully convincing them to play. I haven't been super successful with that so far, but I'm hoping with the launch of the second edition of Underworlds with a few more streamlined rules and just a simpler gameplay might be what I need to push them over the edge to start playing with me. So in this video, I'll be painting the Emberwatch, which is one of the two factions that come with this core set. Really love Games Workshop using colored plastic for the sprues on these warbands. It seems like a simple or even pointless thing, but it allows players who aren't ready in the hobby stage to start painting their models, being able to just put them on the table and start playing with them immediately. And I really like the push fit models. It also means you don't need any glue. And I love that they all come with decorated bases because it thematically makes them look really interesting, and I find basing creative bases quite difficult to do sometimes. Here I'm using a Rust-Oleum flat black primer paint. I find that by priming black under metallic really makes the metallic pop, and I really like doing that. I have been trying to do more like zenithal painting in some of my other models and using contrast paint, but today I just thought I'd stick with the basics and just use what I'm kind of used to using with my Necrons, which is just using normal non-translucent paints. This is the finished product once they've all been primed. I try and not get too thick a layer of paint so you can actually see some of the blue coming through. So I'm starting off with Retributor Armour, which I primarily use in my Necrons for like the jewelry or, ornate markings, but in this Emberwatch unit, they're sort of very, flashy, I guess, with their armor. So they love their gold-plated everything. And I was actually quite surprised that even like the little gaps in between the armor are often painted gold as well. So it's very like simple painting style or a painting scheme. It works really well. Like I think aesthetically it looks really good on them, but it also makes it a lot easier when you're just doing the base coat because you can just put gold pretty much everywhere. For the cape, I noticed that on the cards they are a blue color. So I'm using a really watered down Macragge Blue here. And the reason why I've watered it down is I'm sort of wanting some of the black primer underneath to come through, and that way I can kind of build up some layers over time to kind of create a little bit of depth rather than just doing like a Nuln Oil black wash over the top. So we'll see how that plays out. And the other two warriors here, not the leader, have a cape on their head. So they've got a little bit of a hood going. So I'm just using the same blue color just to kind of bring the blue from the base of the model all the way up to the top. And I also noticed that they kind of have this blue edge highlight along the leather straps. So what I'm doing here is I'm just painting it all kind of blue, trying to avoid the center, but I had a lot of gold paint on this, so I was just going over that at the same time. And then they've also got this fur woolly coat around their shoulders and this little scarf thing behind their neck. So I'm just painting it all with Corax White. Again, I went a really watered down version here, which is not probably the best in this case, but I just think loaded up too much water on my brush, and also their faces as well. I'm just putting a white base coat because it's very hard to paint a face on a black base primer. And then the leader here has his face fully exposed, so just trying to get it all there. And the inside of the cape as well is this white fabric, so I ended up sort of disconnecting the models from the base just so that I could really get at it from all angles. And I'm also trying to paint the edge of the cape, I guess, white as well. And I noticed that it didn't really read as fur too much, so I've got Stormvermin Fur here, which is a grey colour, and it has fur in the name. And again, I've created sort of a wash colour, a wash consistency by watering it down. And I'm just going over the wool cape here, fur cape, just to try and get that grey into some of the recesses so that you can actually see the texture of it come out quite strongly. I've never really painted this type of fabric before, so it's my first go. If you've got any tips or suggestions, please let me know in the comments below. And now I've got Rhinox Hide, which is this dark brown color, and I'm just picking up any of the details like the straps along the chest, or handles of the weapons, just anywhere that would not make sense to be gold. You know, any sort of weapons or pouches and stuff like that. Like the handles wouldn't really make sense to be gold. So just trying to get it delicately into all the areas. And also this one character is standing on a wooden beam, so I sort of painted this wood color. And I also noticed that they have these straps on their hands and legs to hold the armor in place, and they're also this leather. So moving on to Balor Brown now, which is a color that I haven't really used before, but I thought it might make an interesting hair color. I usually go Rhinox Hide or something for hair, but because I'd already used it a lot on the model, I thought to give this a go. But I really appreciate Games Workshop having like different types of hair here. They've got it like plaited in one of the models, and just like a very traditional like Disney prince kind of haircut on this dude. I'm just trying not to get any on the actual face. And then yeah, this was the other bit as well. He has like his hair in a ponytail, and it's kind of popping out here. But let me know as well if you think this reads as hair, or you've got any sort of suggestions, because as you might guess, Necrons don't have a lot of hair. And then I've got Cadian Fleshtone here, where I'm using to paint in the face. I've been trying a lot with Gulliman Flesh contrast paint and these different contrast paints, but I just thought today to try just regular base paint and do the whole model without using any contrast paint. It sort of worked, but this other model here is a bit of a ninja and has just the little eyes peeping out, so it's a little bit hard to paint this one. Trying not to get it onto the hood of the cape. And then I also ended up using this for the bow and arrows as well, just to kind of give it that kind of horse, you know, hair string type vine. And then for the cape, I'm using Agrax Earthshade here, which is just a brown tint, because it still wasn't really reading to me like fur, but I don't know if it really works or not. So let me know in the comments again if you do, but it does definitely darken it up a lot. And then while I've got it out on my brush, I also tried to paint some of the hair. so that the brown would pool in the recesses and just give the hair a bit of a three-dimensional look rather than just looking like it's all 2D with no texture on it. But I'm being really careful not to get any on the face, because that would be bad. I'd have to go and redo it. And then Leadbelcher here is just your normal kind of dull silver color, so any of the blades or the bow and arrow, the crossbow, there's some metallic bits on it. And it works really well with the gold being the primary color. This is like a secondary kind of accent, and with the blue as well, kind of really pops. They're also all wearing belt buckles, and, they have like these bow and arrows and stuff. So there was quite a bit of different details that you can pick out, such as like the center of this bow or the axe. And because it's not a very shiny silver, it works kind of quite well at not taking away the focus. And then there's also some runes etched on to the bow, so I tried coloring in the recesses here with silver, but I ended up getting a lot on the bow itself. So that then segues into using Abaddon Black or any sort of black color here, and just going over any of the areas that I do want to keep black, such as like the center of these leather tassels at the front, or the gloves or the shoes where I've accidentally gotten paint on it that I didn't want to get there. And then this just allows me just to kind of easily go and clean up the model, and because black kind of leads the eye away from it, it's a great color to use to just like fix up any mistakes that you've made. And I make quite a lot of these mistakes. And then as like a very sparse detail color to make things pop, I've got Evil Sunz Scarlet here, which is a red color. And their little emblem that they wear for the Emberwatch is red, so you can just pull out these little details. They've got it on some of their chests, but they've also got it on their weapons as well. So it's just a little detail. And then I noticed as well that they have like a mask covering their mouth, and they used red for that, so I thought I'd copy that same style, trying very carefully not to get it anywhere that I don't want to. But I think it really does kind of make the face pop a little bit more by having it with such a contrasting color to the blue. And then I've got this white scar paint, which is very, it's a layer paint, so it's a little bit better consistency. And I'm just trying to color the eyes. So I famously have not had much success with eyes in the past, so I was really trying not to ruin it. And I managed to kind of do it pretty well on that model. However, here I didn't go and load up my brush again, and by now it's kind of dried, so I didn't really get this second model's eye looking very well. So I went and got some more paint on the brush and gave it a go, but it definitely didn't work. But the face is so small here that you really can't tell. The gold is looking great, but I want some Berserker Bloodshade, which is a red tint color, and I'm going to go over the gold with that color. And what this does is it kind of brings a real royalty or regalness to the gold rather than looking shiny and plasticky. It kind of brings out a richness to it by putting the red glaze over it. And it also then pools around, sort of details in the recesses and adds some extra depth to it. So I was a bit nervous about getting any on the cape because red on the white will be really obvious, but on like the black areas or even the Rhinox Hide, it doesn't really matter if you get a little bit on, because as it's a tint, it only kind of changes, it's like a filter. So, reddy brown and dark brown isn't really that noticeable. But yeah, just taking your time and going slowly on here because I didn't want to make any mistakes so late into the process. But I was really happy with how the model was turning out, considering this was the very first time I've sort of painted these Stormcast Eternal units. I wasn't really happy with this hood here on the back. it was just reading very white and, I don't know, non-fabric-y. So I've got some Seraphim Sepia here, which is a sepia color, obviously, and just trying to give the fabric a little bit more depth and a little bit more texture to it, rather than just having it look really plasticky and white. I'm not in love with this. It's definitely, this and the fur coat is the worst part of the model for me. So I'd really like to improve on that. But it definitely does give it some more texture, and it kind of differentiates it from like the inside of the cape. But now that I'm recording this video, I'm realizing maybe that is meant to be the inside of the cape fabric. I don't know. Then here is another shade, Reikland Fleshshade, and I've started using these labels on the back of the bottle to show what the color actually looks like inside. And as you can see there, it's this brown color. I have watered it down, but in hindsight, I should have watered it down even more. But I just thought the face still read a little bit weird, and I wanted some depth to it. So I was trying to add this flesh shade just to kind of give the face a little bit more details, and also kind of maybe darken the weird white eyes. I think overall it was okay, but yeah, I just wish I had watered it down just a tad more, just to make it less dark. And then here I'm mixing that brown and the Rhinox Hide again together to create this sort of muddy color. If I just did one or the other, I think it would either be too light or too dark, respectively. So by mixing the two colors, it's kind of creating this muddy look. And if I mix them up in slightly different ratios, you do kind of get these natural shifts in the color. You know, some parts are lighter, some parts are darker. I'm also using a makeup brush I stole from my wife. Sorry if you're watching this video. And I'm just doing a technique I think called overbrushing, but it's basically just a really quick way of painting large areas. The rocks themselves, I'm using Stormvermin Fur here, just as a lighter kind of grey-brown color. This is the same color I use for the fur capes, and I'm just kind of just painting over the rocks with this. And at first, it doesn't really look like you're making any difference. It looks like you're kind of painting over with the exact same color, but once the paint dries and we'll do some edge highlighting, it kind of does create a little bit of visual distinction between the two, as you can kind of see here. So I'm using Administratum Grey, which is a very bright grey color. Perhaps it's like a little bit too bright, but I'm just kind of going over the edge of the rocks, which kind of looks a little bit silly because, like, in real life, you know, the edge of a rock isn't brighter than the rock itself. But with these miniatures, creating those visual distinct edges really helps the model look more realistic, even though in real life that's not how light works. And then there's a little skull here. I didn't want to spend too much time on it, but I'm just using Rakarth Flesh here as a base color. But honestly, any sort of white or grey color kind of works here. But this one's quite good to read as bone color. And I'm just trying not to get too much paint onto the base and just getting it just on the skull. But again, I love how Games Workshop has these little base decorations. And then I'm just using Agrax Earthshade, which is that brown tint color again, just to kind of give the skull a little bit of wear and tear, and kind of giving it a bit of age, that it's, 10 years old, worn away into the dirt. Also, on all my Underworld models, I'm using this mossy texture. I don't really know why I'm doing it, but I kind of want all of the Underworld model warbands that I have to kind of have this visual distinction that they're all sort of in the same universe. So I'm using this mossy texture as a way of kind of keeping the foliage consistent. So I've just got some PVA glue here that I have watered down to a 1:1 consistency of PVA glue to water. I'm just kind of creating this weird very watery substance. And then I'm just kind of sprinkling on the mossy texture. I've also got the piece of paper with the build instructions underneath, just so that I can easily, clean up the table, even though I have kind of destroyed the table quite a little bit with all my painting escapades on it. Then while, it's waiting to dry, you can paint the rims of the bases black. I use Abaddon Black here, but obviously you can use any color you like. Personally, I prefer darker colors because it kind of draws the eyes away from the rim and onto the actual model itself. If you pick a really bright, vibrant color, it can kind of draw the eye away from the model onto the rim. And I also wasn't reading this wood blog here as wood. I think with the Rhinox Hide, it was just too dark. So I tried to do this Balor Brown and just kind of paint the raised edges, but as you can see, my paint is way too thick, way too runny. It's kind of going into the recesses, which I was trying to avoid. So I end up just kind of moving the paint around, just trying to create a really thin layer. And then it's time to join the models onto the base. Here I'm using plastic glue. I have kind of recently changed to using super glue, but here I thought there's such a good connection point between the feet and the base that it should be okay to use plastic glue. But let me know in the comments if you prefer using plastic glue or super glue for this final step. Obviously, you could use the pegs as well, but I'm wanting to kind of lock these models into place, and I just find that sometimes with the pegs, there's a little bit of gap there, or over time they can shift and move, whereas here it's fully glued, locked forever. And then I just got the Retributor Armour gold color out again now, and I'm just picking out some of the edges. So because we did that red shade over the top, it means that all of the gold is kind of tinted red. So by going over it again with just the pure gold, kind of brings a little shininess to it. And then I also noticed there was a few little edges around the neck that I'd missed, so I'm just fixing those up as well. But I'm just kind of putting the gold where I think the sunlight would naturally kind of hit. So any of the edges, like these, knee plates or thigh plates. And then I'm using Runefang Steel, which is a very shiny silver. So Leadbelcher is quite muted. This one is quite loud. And I'm just trying to do edge highlights of any of the silver areas, like the edge of the weapon here. Just trying to create, again, that same thing that we did with the rocks, but by creating that edge highlight, just really makes the model kind of pop visually. And yeah, the little daggers. And I also put some onto the gold areas. And I know you might be thinking, why are you doing silver edge highlight on gold? But if you do it really small, like a really subtle details, it can actually read as the light is 100% reflecting, which is what the silver is. I put probably a little bit too much in here, so I'll go back later and just go over it with gold. And then finally, there's all this black, Abaddon Black areas, and it's kind of hard to visually see where, those areas stop and start. So by using Dark Reaper here, which is kind of like a gray, bluish color, if you actually edge highlight the black with it, actually creates some depth into the black painted areas, which is kind of hard to do with just normal black colors. So things like the fingers here, it actually kind of highlights each individual finger as well as the knuckles. So it's just good to bring out the detail in that black area. And then I also didn't like that the sword looked very shiny. So what I was trying to do here is kind of build up 1/4 of the sword, going from light to dark and the other diagonal quarter going from dark to light, just trying to create some visual distinction. And I forgot about the camera angle here, but the hammer as well. I just wanted to kind of darken that up a little bit, as well as like the emblems, just to show the visual distinction there, as well as like areas in the crossbow. Just trying to create some depth. So this is the finished models here. I was really happy how it turned out. I think the cape looks fantastic. I didn't use any shades or any Nuln Oil, but I think you can see here that, you know, there's some depth to the cape. I think the gold with the edge highlighting and the red shade really makes it pop. The face I'm okay with, I'm not in love, and the fur on their backs and their little hoods I'm not in love with. They're the most embarrassing part. The base looks fine, nothing amazing, but it doesn't really draw the eye away. So I had heaps of fun with this model, this warband. I hope you had fun watching me trying to paint it. If you've got any, advice or any feedback, I'd love to hear it. I try and respond to every comment. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.